We're talking Tennessee Titans football on the Our Football Network, Our Football YouTube channel. Thanks for tuning in. And whenever we talk about the Tennessee Titans, we welcome in Mr. Tyler Rowland from the Locked On Titans podcast. How's it going, Tyler?
It's going well. I'll be honest with you, Greg. It was a tough season for the Tennessee Titans. One that I have to admit I'm glad is over.
Yeah, I hear you. I went through one of those seasons myself. So it makes the offseason very interesting because this is when every fan of losing teams have hope that something's going to happen. But last year, something big happened, and they brought in the new head coach and the new coaches and all that kind of stuff. So let's start there. Did you give a grade yet, a passing grade, any sort of grade to Coach Callahan and the staff?
I mean, for me, I think I'd have to go with a C, maybe a C minus. It's disappointing to say that because I was excited for Brian Callahan as a hire, and I still think that he has the potential to be a good coach. But the reality is at least 3 to 4 games, and you could maybe say more if you were more pessimistic of a person. But at least 3 to 4 games, I thought coaching was the biggest issue with the loss, whether it comes down to play calling, the game plan, and how you attack your opponent. I mean, Jacksonville had a bottom 7 pass defense, and the Titans just tried to run it down their throat the entire game in their first matchup, and they lost 10-6 at home. You know, that's just an example of why are we trying to run heavy against a terrible pass defense? You know, just certain questions that I have there. Playing Will Levis on his hurt shoulder against the Indianapolis Colts after the bye, and then he plays the whole game and then has to be out 3-4 more weeks because he hurts the shoulder again. You clearly played him too soon. Like there are specific decisions in games like I'm mentioning here where the coaching was the biggest issue. The Titans have other issues that I'm sure we'll dive into in one way or another, but I do think that Brian Callahan cost this team a couple of wins this year with his greenness. He's a rookie head coach, only 39 years old. He had never even called plays at the NFL level. So now not only is he becoming a head coach of an entire organization, but now he's calling plays for the first time. I think there was just a little bit too much on his plate, and it cost him in the game management elements of his job.
What about Denard Wilson? So how did he do? And, we can get into everything else later on. And same thing with the offense. We'll go over injuries and how that might have impacted both sides of the field there. But what about Denard Wilson year one?
You know, generally speaking, I think Denard Wilson did a pretty good job. The Titans have had a bad pass defense for years and years. Denard Wilson finally turned that around this year. The Titans had a very good pass defense, and he did it all the while having a ton of backups. You mentioned the injuries, which we will get into, but one of the places where the Titans were hit the most with injuries was in the secondary. But yet the secondary actually was one of the parts of the team that didn't crater them every single week, and I think that does go back to Denard Wilson, who, when he was a defensive assistant with the Eagles in 2022 and then the Ravens in 2023, they both had the number 1 pass defense in the NFL the year that Denard Wilson was on the staff. So I think that he did a relatively good job. The Titans had some uncharacteristic breakdowns, though, in certain games, and they really, really, really struggled with mobility at the quarterback position, not only in the run game, but just in being able to evade the pass rush. I think some of that has to do with the Titans' lack of talent in the pass rush and not being able to get these quarterbacks to the ground. But there is a scheme issue as well. When you consistently, every week, you face a mobile quarterback, you give up a ton of rushing yards and a ton of issues. That's something involved with that as well. So I would give a B to Denard Wilson, who did a better job than we've seen recently, but it still was far from perfect, and that's obviously going to be the case for a 3-14 team.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about some players on the team. First of all, that free agency, of course, is the first step, and you have the draft. And I'm also going to ask you to give us your top 5 needs. So we're going to get into that in just a little bit. But talk about free agency. Give me because I was looking over at the free agency grid here, and there's no like dynamic player that it looks like the Tennessee Titans have to deal with. I believe they have about 60 million rough.
Yeah.
Give
about
a change.
60 million.
60
yeah,
million
it changes a little bit here and there, but that's about right.
Yeah. That's more than enough at this point in time. So yeah, who would you consider to be the players that you think Tennessee would prioritize?
Well, I think number one, you got to look at the offensive line. The Titans' offensive line did improve some from previous years where they had been one of the worst offensive lines in the league. The reality is, with Will Levis in, they gave up 1,000,000 sacks. And then with Mason Rudolph in, they didn't give up as many sacks
Okay,
because Will Levis is the biggest reason why the sacks happened. So I think the Tennessee Titans offensive line has improved. It is better, but the right tackle position is still a major, major issue. And I think with all the needs that the Titans have in the offseason, you're not going to be able to fill all of these in the draft. And if you do that, you have a ton of rookies everywhere. And what are the odds that they're going to be good enough in year
sure.
one? So I think there are certain positions where the Titans do need to attack in free agency. And I think offensive tackle is one of those. Cam Robinson, who was traded from the Jaguars to the Vikings, would be a good option for the Titans. A guy like Ronnie Stanley, who's going to be 31 years old, playing for the Baltimore Ravens right now. I don't think they let him out of the building, but that could be an option for the Titans on the high price side. I think a guy like Jedrick Wills, who played for the Cleveland Browns, he's had injury issues in the past, but right now, as we speak, he's only 25 years old. He's got the connection to Bill Callahan, the Titans offensive line coach, because he's coming from
Yeah.
Cleveland. Wills was a first-round pick. He had some really good moments for the Browns when they were doing well with Baker Mayfield. And, at certain points over the last few years when the Browns offensive line has succeeded, it's because Wills has played pretty decent football. So I think going to the offensive line, especially the offensive tackle position in free agency, would be wise for the Titans, even if they draft a rookie in the mid rounds of the draft. Go out and get a veteran offensive tackle. It's a mistake they made last all season before this year, and they can't make that mistake again. So they need to get a veteran there. I also think, if possible, they need to look to the edge. Hassan Reddick, who had issues with the Jets, and maybe that'll scare teams off, but he'll be available. A guy like Khalil Mack, who's going to be 34 years old, but Chase Young, who had a pretty good year with the New Orleans Saints, coming off injury and some concerns there, only 25 years old as we speak. Josh Sweat, a guy from the Philadelphia Eagles, who's been a pretty good edge rusher, whose brother, Tavondre Sweat, is on the Titans. I think those guys would make some sense for the Titans at the edge rusher position as well. Two positions, the edge and the right tackle spot, where the Titans did not do enough this offseason before the 2024 year, and it cost them dearly as those two needs really reared their ugly head throughout the year.
All right. Well, then, regarding how about we go over, because you mentioned the tackle position, let's go over some of the free agents that the Titans need to decide whether to bring back or not. And Radunz, he was a kid that was apparently improving from year to year. What happened to him this past year?
Well, Dylan Radunz actually did improve, and I feel bad for Dylan Radunz because he's been jerked around a ton. He's played right tackle, he's played left tackle, he's played left guard, he's played right guard, and credit to the Callahans, when they showed up, they said, you are playing guard. We're not going to jerk you around. We're not going to try to, cross-train you at all these different positions. You are going to play guard. And he had some really good moments early in the year when Lloyd Cushenberry, the Titans free agent center who they signed, when he went out with an Achilles tear, Dylan Radunz played worse because he had, a lesser player next to him at center. And then when you have as bad of a right tackle position as the Titans have had all year, no matter who was playing that position, it was a disgrace, quite honestly. That's going to make it tough for Dylan Radunz. He struggled with some upper body injuries, shoulder injury, and stuff like that throughout the season. He does have a tendency to get beat to his edges in pass protection. That definitely happens. He doesn't have the strongest hands and the strongest punch, but a good, powerful core. He's a decent athlete. I think Dylan Radunz would be a solid guy to bring back for the Titans at the right guard position. Okay. But if they want to go out there and do something big to upgrade, like a Trey Smith from Kansas City, who's a former Tennessee Vol, then I'm not gonna be upset if they make a big splash there to get a better player. But I think Dylan Radunz is an average NFL starter at guard, and I think he could be an option to bring back for the Titans.
All right. What about any of the other players on offense? We'll start there. I mean, Brunskill's a free agent. You've got Vanett, Boyd, Rudolph, and Westbrook, Akine with the 9 touchdown season. So any of those guys a priority?
I would say that on offense, you could bring back any of those players, and I think it would be a smart move. I think a lot of those guys that you mentioned are depth players, so
Sure.
I guess I'm not like as going to pound the table against them in any way. Nick Westbrook-Akine has been an incredible person and player for this organization for quite some few years. Had a big breakout this year with all the touchdowns that he scored. I think it was 9 touchdowns.
Yeah.
That he caught and only like 30 passes that he caught on the year. He's a solid depth option at wide receiver. I feel the same with Tyler Boyd. The thing is, at wide receiver, the Titans need to add better starting talent to the mix. Traylon Burks is a ghost. They need to cut him. The experiment is over. The A.J. Brown trade that you lost significantly. Time to let that go. Tyler Boyd is going to be 31 years old. Nick Westbrook-Akine is a depth wide receiver who can add value, but isn't really a starting level player. So I think the Titans could bring back those depth guys. I feel the same about Daniel Brunskill. He had to start for the Titans in the back half of the year because of the injury to Lloyd Cushenberry that I mentioned before. But the reality is all those guys could be back. That's fine. They're depth pieces. The Titans need better starting level talent. So I don't feel, I guess, too I don't feel too passionate one way or another about all of those names. They're not guys that you have to bring back, but if you brought them back, I don't think it would be a bad thing either.
All right. On defense, do you feel the same? Because I guess the top names we're talking about are Joseph Day, Baker, the linebacker, and then you got into the secondary, Worley and Diggs. Am I missing anybody notable?
Not really. And to be honest with you, I'm okay with bringing back Quandre Diggs.
Okay.
He played well for the Titans before he broke his foot in the middle of the season, but he is in his 30s. He's on the back end of his career. I think you could bring him back if he's healthy, but you probably still need to address safety at some point in the draft and start trying to build a younger group. Amani Hooker's contract is going to be out soon. And I think anybody else who you mentioned, Daryl Worley was a scrap heap pickup this year. I don't care if he comes back or not. The Titans need to do better than Daryl Worley. Depth, great. You know what I mean? Sebastian Joseph Day is a guy who I'd like to see the Titans bring back. I thought he played well in his role behind Tavondre Sweat and Jeffrey Simmons. I think he had some good moments this year. Luke Gifford was great on special teams. He doesn't need to be your starting inside linebacker, though. That is a disaster for the Titans if he's a starter, but he's a very good special teams player. So I'm okay with bringing him back. I don't really think the Titans have a ton of free agents that they really need to bring back. It's depth guys that serve a good role and could come back, but they're not guys who, if you lost them, you would think the Titans, made a big mistake or anything like that.
Well, speaking of the fact that there's not a whole lot to worry about with the team cash-wise, and there's a lot of cash to spend, is there a possibility that someone else will be spending the cash? How's Ran Carthon's job security right now?
Well, that is the number one thing of debate. And as a matter of fact, he was just fired.
Oh,
so that's happening right now. Ran Carthon is fired. Brian Callahan will stay as the head coach. It's literally just happening right now. So it looks like someone else will be making that decision. I will tell you that Chad Brinker, who is the Titans president of football operations, is the guy who's going to be picking the general manager. That's a big task ahead of the Titans.
Yeah. Do they have, how is the front office generally speaking? Is there like a big hole that needs to be filled?
Now, the general manager role needs to be filled, but the Titans made big changes to their front office before last season where they kind of restructured things. And Chad Brinker is a guy who's an analytics guru who came from Green Bay, who was placed in an equivalent role to Ran Carthon. Ran Carthon is the general manager. Chad Brinker is the president of football operations. So I think the change has been kind of creating more positions. They dove into analytics more and hired more staffers there. So I think in the past year or so, the Titans have built out more of their front office structure, but it's still in the infancy stage, and we're seeing major changes right now.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. We're talking about the inside linebacker position, and I'm looking at the depth chart here at our lads, and I see, of course, that the team, just to remind everybody, most people outside of Tennessee, of course, anybody inside knows what's going on there. But James Williams, Cedric Gray, they were a part of the draft last year. Is there any hope that one of those guys, especially Gray, can take over that position in 2025?
Yeah, I think Cedric Gray was in a tough spot because he came in, he got injured in training camp. They had roster questions, so they didn't want to bring him back too early and create a roster problem where they had to get rid of somebody. So I think Cedric Gray would be the guy that you want to see take a step forward as the 4th-round linebacker, but I really think James Williams, the converted safety out of Miami, who is a 7th-round pick, I think he's got a more realistic path towards being a starter next year and being an impact player just because he's had more experience. He's a bigger guy, and the transition from safety in college to linebacker in the NFL probably set him back a little bit. So I like James Williams and Cedric Gray both as depth players. I'm not certain that either of them take a step forward to be starters next year, but Cedric Gray is definitely a guy you could keep an eye on. If he gets a full, healthy training camp and preseason, it might really speed up his development a little bit more.
Before we go over the team needs, and just quickly on the free agent special teamers, because they're all available. Falk Stonehouse is a restricted free agent, so I would guess he'd be back. Correct me if I'm wrong. Cox, the long snapper. I mean, Falk is just amazing. He just keeps it doesn't matter how old he is. The guy just keeps nailing field goals, 21 of 22. Will they just try to find a young guy and then maybe bring back Falk and hope the young guy, develops? And if he doesn't, they got the fallback option.
Well, Nick Folk said this week after the season ended that he did want to kick in 2025. And I mean, with how well he kicked, why not bring him back? But if you're the Titans, you absolutely do have to get a young kicker in there on the practice squad, training camp battle. Like, you have to start developing a plan and try to, if possible, develop a kicker to take over for Nick Folk. I mean, he's going to be 41 years old. He can't kick forever in the NFL. So for me, I'm fine with bringing Nick Folk back in 2025 if that's what they want to do, but you have to start working on your plan.
Another rookie I see there, Jackson, the 6th-round pick, didn't get much action as a receiver, but he ended up being the team's top kick returner.
He did, but he fumbled a ton at the end of the season, ended up getting benched for the last month of the season. It's funny. He was number one at one point during the season. He was number one in AFC Pro Bowl voting for special teamers.
Oh.
And then literally got benched the same
fumbled it away.
That came out. Yeah, he fumbled it away entirely. So, Jaquan Jackson, maybe he could take a step forward, but I would be surprised if he got the opportunity next year that they gave him this year after he squandered it.
All right, now let's go over the needs. It's up to you if you want to do them in order or if you just want to throw them out there and then you can put them maybe in order when we're done. Go ahead and take it away. How do you want to handle it?
Well, I could just go from one down. I think the number one need for the Tennessee Titans is quarterback. Who is going to play quarterback? You can't go with Will Levis and Mason Rudolph. Now, do the Titans go into the draft with the number one pick and take one of the quarterbacks? It's not necessarily the best quarterback draft. I don't know where Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward would have ranked in last year's class, probably behind Bo Nix, behind Drake May at minimum. So now you're taking a guy who would have been the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th quarterback last year and taking him at number one. I don't know if that's wise. You could look at the veteran quarterback market, and that's really dependent on guys who aren't available yet. Will Aaron Rodgers want to play this year? Will he be released by the Jets? He has land and a home in Nashville. What about Derek Carr from the Saints? Is he going to get released by them? Obviously, Sam Darnold is going to be on the market, but you might have to pay Sam Darnold $50 million a year with the way that he played with Minnesota this year. And is Minnesota really going to let Sam Darnold leave after the season that they've had? There's a lot of questions there. So there are paths that the Titans can go, But what they will do, I don't know. But that's clearly their number one need. Their number two need for me is that right tackle position, or if you want to say offensive tackle, because the Titans could go out and get a left tackle like some of the free agents we talked about, and then move J.C. Latham, who played right tackle in college, back to the right tackle spot after he had his ups and downs at the left tackle position as a rookie. So the Titans need another offensive tackle. They're going to need a guard, but offensive tackle is just a much more important position. So offensive tackle is that next need for me. Right after that, you go to edge rusher. And honestly, you could make an argument that edge rusher is the number two need or the number one need for the Tennessee Titans. Harold Landry had a decent season and he had 9 sacks, but Harold Landry isn't a one-on-one winner in pass rush. He's a guy who wins with effort and he has cleanup sacks at the end. And he doesn't really win with his moves to create immediate wins in the pass rush. And Arden Key is a third edge rusher. He's not a starting level player in the NFL. So the Titans desperately need a starting level edge rusher. They absolutely do. That's why I personally am in favor of trading down and taking Abdul Carter out of Penn State in the NFL draft to help with the Titans' need there at edge. So quarterback, offensive tackle, edge rusher are the top 3 needs for the Titans. After that, I would certainly go to wide receiver. They have Calvin Ridley, but after that, they don't have any other starting level wide receivers, and you need explosiveness. And then finally, on the defensive side of the ball, I would finish off with inside linebacker. I'm not a person who likes to put a ton of resources towards inside linebacker, but the Titans are just so disastrously bad at inside linebacker right now that they need to try to find somebody as soon as possible.
Okay, so then you are under agreement, though, regarding the quarterback situation. That's nice to hear. What does your best guess tell you? Do you think that, and again, you don't even know who the new GM is going to be, so I know I can't really ask you to get too involved in this, but it really is making more sense, and I think even the fan base, correct me if I'm wrong, would feel the way you do, that as much as the team needs a quarterback, taking one of these 2 kids with the first pick is just probably not the way to go.
Yeah, I think it would be a dangerous move. Again, these guys are good prospects, but they're not great. And when you take a guy number 1, you are saddling yourself to them, your job security to them. Clearly, there's a new GM who's going to come in, probably going to make his decision on these quarterbacks and stake his job on these quarterbacks. And I just think it's a very, very risky proposition to do it. And I think the Titans are far away from a quarterback changing the fortunes of the team. Like they're so bad at offensive tackle and so bad at edge rusher and so bad at wide receiver. Like the Titans roster is so depleted at so many critical positions that you take a young quarterback, how are they going to fundamentally change what this team looked like this year? How are they going to overcome the problems that the Titans had this year?
Yep.
I just don't think.
I agree.
I don't think that either of these quarterbacks are going to be able to elevate the Titans further than what they were with the skill sets they have.
And by the way, I know Carter is it probably will be the number 1 guy. I really like that kid Ezaraku out of Boston College. I don't know exactly where he's going to go as far as how high he's going to go, but that kid I think is going to be a star in the NFL. And maybe he will move up once everybody gets a hold of him because we have a long way to go as far as the All-Star games and such. Quickly, JJ McCaffrey. Was McCaffrey somebody the Titans were interested in last year? And again, you could have a new GM. If they let's say they go ahead and Minnesota signs Darnold long term. Is that a possibility that if Minnesota was able to dangle a JJ McCarthy out there for a first-round pick, that would make any sense?
Well, I think there's been some conversation about that, but I think the Titans would be absolutely insane if they were to trade anything of value for a guy who just tore his ACL, who honestly I wasn't super high on coming out of the draft anyway. He was a guy who was minimized by his college team. Like they won the championship by minimizing him and trying to just run the ball and have him do as little as possible. So for me, after an ACL tear, losing a year of his rookie contract, and then you'd have to pay at least a 2nd round pick right, to do that. Maybe Minnesota would try to recoup a first. The Titans aren't giving the first overall pick to Minnesota to get a guy who just tore his knee up and lost a year of his rookie contract value. So I understand why that would be a conversation and why we should explore all possibilities, but that doesn't seem realistically feasible in my opinion.
Okay. Last couple of questions. Injuries. Give me some injured players that, because everybody's going to be, especially if they take a look at the depth chart and they start wondering as far as, which players need to be upgraded and which positions don't, because there are some players, and you named a couple of them. We went over some young kids, and maybe inside linebacker is one of those spots. But give me a couple of young players that you think have developed over the last year or two that might be able to take that next step and fill a spot of need for this team in the for next season.
I mean, I think the saddest thing about it is, Greg, I don't have an answer for you. There isn't anybody. This team is terrible. Like,
okay.
The starters are bad. So there aren't a lot of young guys that are like ready to rise up and be good. I'll give you one name that does make sense, and it's on the defensive side of the ball, and it's Jarvis Brownlee Jr., the 5th-round cornerback out of Louisville. He had to step up this year with L'Jarius Sneed out most of the year, Chido Awuzie out most of the year, and he looked like a really solid player, a guy who could be a starter for the Titans for multiple years in the future. So Jarvis Brownlee Jr. is probably the only answer that I can realistically give you, because there are no other good answers on the roster, if I'm honest.
Let's go through. Let's see. Mike Brown, the safety. Is he somebody that the team were they happy with his development? Is he somebody that could be a good depth player?
Yeah, I think he's solid depth piece. I mean, he's not a guy who you want as a starter. He's not a guy who I think you even want as like your third safety. I would rather have a more talented guy there, but as a guy who plays hard, knows what he's supposed to do, lines up in the right spot. He's a pretty solid player, but I don't think he has the talent to be somebody who, we, I guess, spend a lot of time thinking about what he can be for the team. You could replace Mike Brown with, 300 other guys in the NFL, and he'd probably be about the same.
Okay. Gibbons. We talked about Gibbons as somebody that was a little underrated coming into the season. Mm-hmm. And once again, it looks like he had a nice little underrated season. He was injured. He's on the injured list here. So is that just another player? Again, he's playing inside linebacker. Is he with the 2 spots in the 3-4? Is he somebody that, if he's healthy, should be penciled in as a starter and you're going to be okay?
No. Okay. If he's penciled in as a starter, you are in trouble. I think Jack Gibbons is, again, kind of similar to Mike Brown. He's a solid depth piece. If he's your 3rd, your 4th linebacker, he's got to play because there's injuries, great. But if you go into the season with Jack Gibbons set to be your starting linebacker, you're in trouble. He just does not have the athleticism to compete consistently at the NFL level. He's hard-nosed. He'll be in the right spot. He plays with physicality. He plays with toughness. He was playing good football before he got hurt, no doubt about it, but he's a liability in coverage. He doesn't have the athleticism to be a full-time starter at the NFL level. Honestly, he's a replacement level linebacker. Like I said with Mike Brown, you could probably flip him with about 60 other linebackers on the depth chart in the NFL, and it'd be probably around the same.
How about the D3 kid, Rupchich, who we talked about? I know he ended up injured. Is he somebody that you believe can still develop down the road?
Yeah, he could continue to develop. I think his development ceiling, though, is probably a backup guard. Okay. I think where the Titans use Daniel Brunskill this year as their primary backup interior offensive lineman, Andrew Rupchich could maybe perform that role. But, I'll just be honest with you, Greg. When we talk about a team that's 3-14 that's this bad, we're talking about backups of backups who could maybe develop. Like, the reality is this team is terrible. So the backups, if the starters are terrible, the backups are terrible. And if Andrew Rupchich never played for this team ever again, it's probably a good thing. They probably improved upon him. That, like, they need to improve pretty much outside of like 3 spots on the team. Calvin Ridley and Jeffrey Simmons and Amani Hooker. Like, they need improvement at every single possible spot, depth and starter. They're just in a very bad way. And now with this news that the general manager is being fired, I mean, we don't have time to fully get into,
Sure.
Every thought I have on it, but this team is just in complete disarray. It's a disgraceful franchise. And all these, backups on the roster, they probably aren't good enough to be anything more than practice squad, but because the Titans are so terrible, they get these opportunities and then we have to discuss their potential. But these guys probably should never see the field in the NFL for a team that's any good.
Okay. No wonder why Carthon got fired.
Right.
Yeah, so Cushionberry, of course, was injured week 9, I believe. Snead week 6, and Awuzie missed a bunch of games. Everything going to be okay with the 3 of them, especially Snead and Cushionberry?
Yeah, Snead is an interesting case because, he had some medical concerns when he was in Kansas City. They worked around him, and he was able to play basically every snap. Immediately comes to Tennessee, plays 4 games, plays terrible in those games that he played. And then he gets some weird thigh injury where he's getting thigh injections and he's still got a leg cast on his leg right now. And it's been months. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if L'Jarius Sneed never plays for the Tennessee Titans ever again. Like, I've been a Titans fan for 25 years. I know how these things go. Awuzie was getting older anyways. He had a ton of injury issues before he was let go in Cincinnati. So I don't really think you can count on either of those players. And that's why, a guy I mentioned earlier, Jarvis Brownlee Jr. is so important. The Titans are just in a tough spot when it comes to some of these players who they paid, who you can't count on to be on the field. And again, I guess that's why, the general manager is getting fired while we're recording the show because, it's just too much money for players who aren't out on the field.
And Cushionberry, did he just not play well? Was he playing okay? How did he play before he got hurt?
He was playing pretty solid. It wasn't great, but the entire offensive line was coming together early with a lot of young players. But I think Lloyd Cushenberry, who did say recently in an interview that he should be back by June, which is before training camp. So that's great news for the Titans. I think Lloyd Cushenberry should be fine.
All right. That's going to wrap it up. One more. Kenneth Murray. Murray ended the season on IR. Is he a cut candidate? And is anybody else a cut candidate?
I think that Harold Landry is a guy who could be a cut candidate. He's a good player, but his cap hit is north of $20 million in the coming season.
Got it.
And he's just simply not worth that. I think Kenneth Murray is a guy who would make a lot of sense to get rid of. I do not like Kenneth Murray as a player. I hated that signing when it happened. I do not think that he's a very good starting level football player, but the Titans seem to love his skill set and his leadership and all that. I just think he's a disaster in coverage, and you can't have linebackers who are that bad in coverage. Having Jack Gibbons and Kenneth Murray as your starting linebackers just makes it so hard to cover the middle of the field with how bad those guys are in pass coverage that I would like to see the Titans move on and try again with somebody else, but I don't think they will. I think Kenneth Murray will be brought back, but I think Harold Landry, because of the money he's set to be paid, could be a surprise cut candidate.
Okay. Well, with the new GM, everything's going to be on the table. Tyler, I really appreciate this. Now, for anybody out there that's a Titans fan that is checking out this video and maybe they haven't gotten to, I would think they would have, but maybe they haven't found you yet. And you are obviously going to put up a new video, I'm assuming today, on what's going on with Carthon. With Carthon. So we're going to have links in the description for how to find all of Tyler's content, social media, all of that kind of stuff. And again, you do pretty much stuff every day, right, Tyler?
Yes, every single day. Yep.
All right. And again, same thing with the podcast and stuff. We'll have links in the description. Mm-hmm. You can all find out how to get a hold of Tyler. And Tyler does a great job covering this really bad football team. So
yes,
that's okay. I could say that because mine's pretty bad too. Tyler, I appreciate it. Best of luck. And I hope to get the opportunity to talk to you after the draft, unless something huge happens before then. But after the draft, worst case scenario, that should be a lot of fun catching up and seeing how the new general manager does.
Yeah, 100%. It's going to be a crazy time.
Excellent. Thanks, Tyler.
Yep. Take care.